please. So first up, we have got in another in another 5 days, actually, we have the Middle Atlantic New England region Women in Green Rising Collective. We have got a great line of speakers, all from our region. And this is a panel discussion with Harisa Gadzoulis from JLL as the moderator. Karen Trans from AKRF NYSERDA is being represented by Jessica Deely, and Sarah Swikla has been very active on other panels that we have been doing on climate change. Next slide, please. Also up in another fortnight or so is our community in Central Pennsylvania. They are organizing their digital office hours. And as part of that, they are also going to be presenters who will be talking about energy efficiency incentives which are available in Pennsylvania as a whole, and specifically Central Pennsylvania. Next slide, please. Next up, on the very next day after the Central PA event on June 15th, we have the Resiliency Lunch and Learn series. This is an ongoing series, and this is the 6th edition. It will be for this year. We are going to talk about hazard adaptation at the building scale, basically talking about how hazard adaptation can be adapted for communities, for campuses, for neighborhoods, cities, and so on. This is being jointly hosted by the SAME and US Green Building Council. This is the free event, as most of our events are. We encourage you to join these, spread the word, and encourage your colleagues and friends to also join us for these coming together of like-minded individuals. With that, I'm going to hand it over. Okay, last but not the least, I forget about this one. This is an upcoming new platform which is being launched by the US Green Building Council. This is called a Product Solutions Showcase. This is still a little way ahead of us. July 26th to 28th, 3 days of events, 2.5 hours in the afternoons to allow people from across the country to participate. This allows 50 product manufacturers to showcase their products. Actually, the deadline is May 31st. If any of you are interested, please do go ahead and apply. Vidya and I will be happy to share the information with you. And we look forward to seeing you there. Thank you so much. And I think now we have wrapped up the initial information we wanted to share. It's over to you, Vatsal. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Gautam, Maria, for inviting us to be a part of your webinar series and highlight LEED for communities to the Mid-Atlantic and New England region. Today, we are going to be having an interesting panel, as Maria highlighted earlier. We have 4 distinguished panelists who are going to be talking about their experiences working with LEED for cities and communities. Mainly, it's the communities part of LEED for cities and communities. But you will see how different partners are trying to utilize this particular rating system. Some are going to give you some insights into how to utilize it. Some are going to give you some examples from their projects. And, whether you are a consultant, whether you are a university, whether you are an authority working with a city or a community, you would get some very interesting insights because 4 of our panelists are really bringing that kind of very, very interesting background. Especially Ricardo brings an interesting background, being a green developer, but at the same time, he's a chef as well. So you'll see how our partners in this region are trying to work with LEED for communities in some interesting ways, and ways in which we can work with you all in the future. So Gautam, Maria, and my interest to highlight these projects to you is to find out ways in which we can work with you over time in taking this discussion forward. So with that, let me go ahead and give you a little bit of perspective about LEED for cities and communities. We have a lot of projects across the world, and many of them are LEED for community projects. And here, I think point here is to really start talking about the ways in which LEED for cities and communities are making that difference. So you have known a lot about LEED for buildings and interiors. You have also seen LEED ND. Now LEED for cities and communities is trying to talk about the ways in which we can connect up right from interiors to buildings to communities to cities and regions. And we do talk about net zero in terms of energy, carbon neutrality, water, waste, and many other aspects of it. So you can see that LEED for cities and communities is an integral part connecting from interiors of the buildings to communities to cities. And we have few examples that would show you this very, very intricately. Like our headquarters is in Washington, D.C., located in Golden Triangle Business Improvement District. And obviously our offices are LEED certified. The building is LEED certified. Obviously offices are platinum certified. Building is gold certified. This particular Golden Triangle Business Improvement District in which our offices are located is platinum certified. And then this particular city, our national capital, Washington, D.C. is also certified as platinum. And there are many other aspects of it. We can discuss it more in detail, but just highlighting another example from Atlanta as well. And there are a lot of these benefits, as I highlighted, about zero carbon energy waste. And when we talk about LEED for cities and communities, we have 4 variants, but here we'll be talking about the communities part of it. And so LEED for communities in plan and design projects are roughly 57%. You can see the kind of projects that we have in China, in Europe, in Latin America, as well as in United States. And you will see the diversity of projects. And Ted is going to talk about this particular universal theme park in Beijing. And he'll highlight quite a lot of aspects of ways in which they are using this particular rating system to go green. But we are working with a lot of communities that are existing, like what Ricardo is going to talk about, what Eric is going to talk about, what Neil is going to talk about today. And I just wanted to show you some glimpses of the kind of projects. Many of the developers like Boston Property and Howard Hughes are utilizing our rating system. But Stuyvesant Town and Peter Cooper Village in New York City are also utilizing this particular rating system and getting certified. They are trying to put a lot of energy efficiency, renewable energy aspects within that. And most of you may have known about Balboa Park in San Diego, a national historic district, and that is also certified to LEED for cities. San Francisco Airport is about to get certified to LEED for communities. And there are many big projects in Asia, Latin America, that are getting certified to LEED for cities, plan and design, like this particular 50 square kilometer area around the Beijing's new third international airport, or this 94 square kilometer area in Philippines, New Clark City. So you can see the diversity of projects that we have under LEED for communities projects. And let me highlight a couple of other projects that are here in United States as well. Ricardo is going to talk about this particular district. I just briefly talked to you about Stuyvesant Town and Peter Cooper Village in New York City. And we have, in Brooklyn, 100 Flatbush. It's a small community project that is a very interesting way in which trying to talk about all electric buildings and so on and so forth. Eric is going to talk about this particular New York Olympic region discussion that he worked with his students. Rockefeller Center is also registered and working towards it. We have Montclair State University, a university campus trying to go LEED for communities. This is about Boston Properties Reston Town Center in Virginia. It was a Sasaki master plan community and smart growth principles. This is the Golden Triangle Business Improvement District, Balboa Park. Atlanta Airport is also certified. San Francisco Airport is going net zero in energy, water, waste. So it's a unique one. This is Upper Harbor Terminal in Minneapolis that is trying to work with it. It's 48 acres project, redevelopment project. This is a golf course, brownfield development, 112 acres in St. Paul, the adjoining city. They are also pre-certified. And on Main Dayton is a 38 acres project, an old county fairground, now getting refurbished. There are many other projects in Europe, China, Latin America as well. And Siemens headquarters and their original factory buildings and all are getting refurbished, nearly 70 hectares project. You can see Siemens is trying to deploy all their smart city technologies in this particular project by going net zero as well, and trying to infuse equity in this discussion as well. Milan's financial district called Porta Nova has a lot of buildings that are already LEED and well certified. It's 30 hectares, but they are also trying to infuse all LEED for communities related criteria. These buildings you might have seen designed by Stefano Boeri called Bosco Verticale. And these two residential buildings are integral part of that discussion. So it's a mixed use development. You can see very unique way in which all these very popular architects and engineers have been working with Porta Nova. And greenness is integral part of it. Madrid's north part, roughly 235 hectares, is getting refurbished. And they are utilizing LEED for communities rating system to take the discussion further. There are many other projects in Latin America and as well as in China. I'm not going to go into much of the details with the kind of time limitations that we have, but we'll be happy to get onto one-on-one discussions with you if at all you have more interest in this, and we'll be happy to take this discussion further. With that, let me try to stop sharing my screen, and we would begin with the next presentation. I would like to invite Neil Angus to take it forward. Thank you so much.
Great, thanks, Vatsal. So let me share my screen here and get started. So welcome, everybody. Very happy to be here. My name is Neil Angus. I am an environmental planner with the Devens Enterprise Commission. We are the permitting and regulatory authority that's overseeing the redevelopment of former Fort Devens. Devens is a former military base located about 35 miles outside of Boston. We are a Superfund site. The Army has left us with a lot of contamination in the form of brownfields that needed to be cleaned up. So we're in an ideal location and situation, where there's existing infrastructure that can be reused and helps avoid greenfield development. We're developing in areas where infrastructure can actually handle it. We have a robust infrastructure of rail, as well as highway and roadway connections. So it's a very good location. And when the Army chose to close down this base, they did a charrette with the surrounding towns and decided that, we want the towns decided they wanted this area to develop in a much more sustainable manner than how it was previously used. So sustainable redevelopment became a big push for the redevelopment plan for Devens. So looking at economics as well as open space and environmental protection, but also having residential areas and some social equity components. We have a lot of social equity services for the local area as well as the region. So here's just a nice overview of kind of the main post of Devens area, or Rogers Field, nice recreational field area. In Devens, so Devens went through the STAR community rating system, which is now LEED for cities and communities, back in 2017. Actually, we started in about 2015. I think it was like a 2-year process. It was quite involved, but we got 4-star certification from the STAR community rating system in 2017, and then was converted to LEED for cities and communities in 2018. So we're excited to be part of that cohort. We've done a lot to further the sustainable redevelopment mission of Devens. And I'm going to talk about some of the things we've done to get there. And I stole this slide from Vatsal I'm not sure if he remembers it, but from a couple of years ago. We did a presentation you know, this is what it's really all about, LEED for cities and communities. It's about beyond buildings. It's about connecting buildings with their surroundings, looking at the systems and the systems that actually connect all these buildings. I really look at this LEED for cities and communities rating system as really an operations and maintenance guide for that system improvement or improvement of the city and town operations. And that's how we've used it. Why did we use it? Well, it aligned perfectly with our sustainable redevelopment goals. All of the credit categories, natural systems, ecology, transportation and land use, water efficiency, energy and greenhouse gas, materials and resources. All of these things were, you know, key elements of our reuse plan. And you know, LEED for cities and communities was just a great tool to help us guide us in the right direction towards that sustainable redevelopment goal. So we initially really used STAR and LEED as really a gap analysis because we had sustainability engraved into our reuse plan already. Going through the rating system, we found that we were really good in built environment. We had a lot of net zero energy buildings, energy efficient buildings. Natural systems. Devon's is a master plan community. You saw in that initial slide I showed there's a lot of green space, and that was intentional. Devon's was master planned to protect all the critical natural resources in the area and integrate development into nature, not overtake nature. So that's been a big part of our thing. So you can see here from our scorecard from the initial STAR community rating system, we scored very high in built environment. Again, that's because of our net zero energy buildings, and very high in natural systems due to our open space preservation and connectivity. But we identified weaknesses as well too. From a climate and energy perspective, we really didn't have a good handle on our greenhouse gas emissions. And that's where this LEED for cities and communities helped us understand that, hey, we need to do a little more on that side. So it helped us, since we got certification, we identified and put together a game plan for, okay, what do we need to focus our efforts on? And obviously climate change was one of the key issues that we focused on, greenhouse gas inventory and a climate action plan. Again, to get back at, to find out more about what we can do to increase those climate and energy points. And, STAR and LEED gave us a lot of elements to help us advance those goals. They helped guide us through the greenhouse gas inventory and climate action plan. These are things that they were on our radar, but we weren't sure where they fit in to the whole redevelopment process. And through this process, it helped us understand that these are really performance metrics that we need to get a better handle on now. So they kind of helped us, create that game plan for getting, getting those elements under control and putting an action plan together and in place. Another great, great benefit of the system was, that this obviously helped us think of, our communities as systems. Like I said in the beginning, it's not just buildings, it's not just green space, it's how everything interacts with each other. And this rating system really helped us get a better handle on that. It really also helped us collaborate and connect with surrounding communities, with individuals in our communities and groups in our communities to bring everybody together. One of the biggest benefits, we met with some of the hospitals in the area and the surrounding region and found out, so much information that they were doing was in line with what we wanted to do in making Devon's a more healthy and safe community. And we didn't need to reinvent the wheel. They were already doing a lot of these things. We just need to create that partnership. So creating partnerships was a huge benefit as well. The rating system helped us frame our climate action plan and priorities. See here on the left side of your screen is LEED for cities and communities categories, and then our climate action plan categories, all kind of interrelated. again, I mentioned, using the rating system as a resource. It helped us identify metrics and actions and strategies that we could use to not only implement our climate action goals, but make Devens a more walkable, more environmentally friendly, a more socially engaging community. And it helped us create, understand that we needed to do what kind of tools we needed to create, like a dashboard to help track these metrics that we're measuring through LEED. And again, like I mentioned earlier, provide a roadmap showing where we are, where we're going, and where we want to be and how to get there. I mentioned, we created a climate action plan. Part of what came out of our climate action plan was we needed tools to help businesses and residents implement or help us meet our climate action objectives for Devens. So we created this toolkit, which kind of looked at some of the categories in LEED for cities and communities, and took out some of those elements and shared them with businesses, primarily businesses. Devens is kind of a unique situation where we have about 400 residences and about 6,000 employees. So there's a big focus on economic redevelopment because of the former military base as a huge economic engine for the area. But we wanted to make sure that we do have a sustainable community. So we did include residential efficiency measures as well. But for the purposes of this, the biggest bang for our buck was to hit the businesses that are the biggest energy users, the biggest greenhouse gas emitters, and really help them get a better handle on it. And this toolkit did it, did that. And you can check this out on our website. I'll have more resources at the end as well. Another thing we did for businesses and communities, or businesses and residents, was create green infrastructure guidelines, again, to help integrate these elements into developments, to help connect nature and that whole systems approach that I talked about earlier. If we can show people how to do the right thing, it's so much easier than just telling them, oh, you need to do this. And they're like, how do I install a green roof? How do I install biofiltration landscape islands or create renewable energy systems or install a cistern? These guidelines help show developers how they can do it, not only how they can do it, but the objectives that it meets, our local regulations that it meets, as well as the sustainability goals in LEED that it meets, as well as some of their corporate sustainability objectives possibly as well. One of the cool things we did too was we really used LEED ND, LEED for neighborhood development, as a model to model our new housing developments that we have in Devens. We took the best elements out of LEED ND. We didn't get this community certified for LEED ND, but we took the best elements and used them to create a better, more livable, walkable community. So we took the compact, energy and water efficient building elements, green and complete streets elements, and came up with a plan for 130 units of mixed housing types. And the rendering you saw there, this is what's actually been constructed today. This was actually a couple of years old, but very narrow streets, buildings right up to the edge of the road. You can't tell from this, they all kind of look probably like single family homes, but these are single family duplexes, triplexes, all mixed together. And from where I've taken this picture, there's 2 20-unit apartment buildings under construction. So lots of mixed housing types, which adds to affordability. And we've used this really new tool. It's not really a new tool, but it's new for planning. And that's a biometric tool to kind of assess the development and how it could be more socially engaging or good for mental health. And just to give you some context on where that development that I just showed you was built, it's right in this area here. This is our residential zone within Devens. So some existing historic houses in Devens. So an extension of a new neighborhood. It's a former Army housing neighborhood. So it was an extension of an existing neighborhood. We connected it in with open spaces. These are all the green areas you see are all the surrounding open spaces, protected open spaces, commercial core. and job centers. These are all our industrial and commercial job center areas. So you can see our residential neighborhoods are all within, a half-mile radius, so close for walking or biking, transit accessible. And all those items are intentionally, were intentionally planned, and LEED for Cities and Communities and the STAR community rating system helped us recognize that and helped us plan, and locate these future residential areas and areas that would help us achieve those lower vehicle miles traveled, provide access to services, access to jobs and social services. So it's been great. One of the cool things that I mentioned that I'll just touch on briefly is smart community design using biometrics. So what we've done is partner with Tufts University and use these biometric measures. So there are things like eye tracking glasses, galvic skin response sensors, and post and pre and post surveys. And these biometric tools help measure unconscious reactions to physical forms. So it's helping us understand how developments and the development patterns that we create are impacting our mental, emotional, and social health and well-being. Is doing it in a subconscious manner, things we don't think about, like when we walk down a street. Why does this street cause us anxiety? Is it the high speed of traffic driving by? Is it the types of buildings? This kind of technology is helping us better understand, how the developments we create affect our physical and mental health and well-being. So it's really helping us promote more socially engaging and inviting walking and safe communities. This is just a quick image, like a heat map image showing, the biometric response to walking down that street. There's a number of fixation points that are built into these new houses that kind of help drive exploration or drive people to naturally flow through a neighborhood in a comfortable way and a less stressful way. When you look at the backs of these houses where the garages are, these are all alley serviced. The garages just don't provide that same kind of those same fixation points, and they don't guide or drive exploration. They kind of really confuse people, and that leads to additional stress and anxiety subconsciously. So understanding that is a big thing. Some of the credits that these biometric tools could help us achieve or help satisfy or help contribute to. There's quality of life issues and health and safety. If you have areas that are more comfortable, where people are more outside and feel more interactive, you can reduce crime. Quality of life, like I mentioned, reducing stress. People are more apt to get out and walk. They're apt to improve their public health, as well as transportation and land use. If people are more interested in walking or more comfortable in walking, it's reducing vehicle miles traveled. So there's a big help there. So I've already mentioned why we use STAR and LEED. There's a great tool and there are a menu of options. I'm not going to go into all this, but we used it from a planning standpoint as well as an implementation standpoint. And as I said earlier in the presentation, I really look at this as, LEED operations and maintenance for cities and communities. It's a really cool program that you should all, check out. Whether you go for certification or not, it's a great tool to use. Collaboration is key, building support, partnering with local, with all the different departments in your community is huge. That, the system helped us bring together all these departments, as well as the boards and commissions, identifying shared interests where we have commonalities and where there's co-benefits to doing these things. It really helped us identify those co-benefits. So just in closing, the LEED for Cities and Communities helped us helped us identify barriers to code and regulations, helped us reduce those barriers, helped us build consensus, and it helped us show, provide demonstration projects to show people how it can and is being done. And we didn't just regulate everything. We had a mix of education, incentives, as well as some regulations. And this helped with the market transformation. The more people see these things, the more demand there is for it. And again, we used it as a resource. And I would encourage you all to look at it as a resource, even if you're not looking for certification. Here's tools and resources. I think we'll have those available for people after the presentations, but some great tools on the LEED website for cities and communities. And check out our Devon's information for more information on Devon's. And I've got my contact information at the end as well. And I'll turn it back over to Vatsal.
Thanks, Neil. That was great, amazing information and a lot of things that you are doing. So thanks for coming and helping us highlighting your good work here. I'd like to now move on to Ricardo.
All right, hello everybody. Let me share my screen. All right, so my screen share?
Yes.
Yeah, can everybody see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Great, so I'll get started. Well, thank you everybody for having me here. Like what Sal said, I have a very diverse background. I have everything from a banking background. I'm a chef. I was an energy auditor. I kind of still am. I contracted by NYSERDA. And then until a couple of years ago, during COVID, I also helped start a nonprofit called Sustainable United Neighborhoods that meant to bring people together to sustainability within one of the places that has one of the biggest income disparities in the US. Unfortunately, COVID struck and communities were affected, but other communities were affected more than others. I had the great opportunity to team up with World Central Kitchen, and 2 weeks into COVID, we went and we helped our communities and we fed them, right? We started farmers markets out for them. Luckily, through contacts that I knew, we were able to help scale their operations so we could feed everybody within New York City. But going through that, I was really hurt and I wanted solutions. So one of the recurring things that kept going through my mind is a saying in Spanish that goes, solo el pueblo salva el pueblo, meaning that only the town saves the town. So I decided to evolve my vision and start Ricardo Lopez and Associates. What I've evolved to become recently is a community broker in low-income communities to bring them the resources and services needed to develop resilience and equity for them. Now that's a mouthful and that's a lot. So let me get into my community aspect. I am a social enterprise and I developed this project which is now more than a pilot, is actually happening thanks to great people like Vatsal and other partners that we have around that really believe in this. Not only that, it's also a necessity. We're going to talk about equity. It's different than equality, right? We could all try to be equal, but at the end of the day, there has been a lot of generational traumas, issues, you name it, right? That kind of changes things up. And let me get started. Okay, let me go here. All right, so like I mentioned, the name of the project is called Resiliency in Communities. It's meant for us to do some long-term planning within our communities so that way we could cope with these complex challenges that we have that are brought by some things like income insecurity, which are one of the things which we're going to get more into what the issues that ideally we got to overcome within our communities. As you can see, Resilience in Communities is a three-pronged approach. We're talking about, baking in sustainability, and the first and foremost thing being an assessment within our communities to get the inventory check of what's really happening before we could plan. Luckily, we have LEED for Communities as a great tool for us to use, and that's what I'm looking to use not only in New York, but throughout the world. I got projects in Ecuador and Galapagos and Quito that we're working with Vatsal also, but to focus here in New York, as you can see by by the little people. These are places that I have contacts in, resources, community partnerships, as you can see in the second piece, right? Where I work with organizations, I work with community leaders, I work with a diverse group of people so that we could basically develop our communities internally and with allies also. Within the yellow marks that you see here, those are the LEED for communities, neighborhoods that we're going to start off, starting in Brooklyn. The reason why I have East Williamsburg and Williamsburg is because due to gentrification and due to a lot of different things that is happening in our community, especially in New York, Williamsburg in the 90s used to be all Williamsburg, and then it changed zoning because of development issues, right? That way you could price out certain places. They did the same thing in Red Hook with Liberty Heights. Same thing happened here. So now there's a Williamsburg and an East Williamsburg. There's a layer that I'll go into a little bit later on, but you see the bluish tint. That's a filter that I put in through GIS mapping, where you're able to see the people living below poverty lines. The darker it gets, the worse it is. So as you can see, I'm only working in the places that have that dark blue hue. And if you start looking here at Williamsburg, you see that towards the water, of course, the Williamsburg side, it gets lighter. And as you get to the East Williamsburg, the Bushwicks and the Bed-Stuys of the world, it's all full of dark blue circles, right? I mean, or spaces, which shows, a very visual representation of what's unfortunately happening in the communities. And then the third piece becomes a community appreciation piece, which are, besides the programming we're trying to do, are initiatives that we're doing in the community so we could beautify, so we could activate, and so we could, preserve our communities. Here are basically the actual specific neighborhoods within the boroughs that I'm talking about. So we're going to be starting off, and part of the presentation is within our Williamsburg, East Williamsburg project pilot. As you can see, we're in Bushwick, we're in Bed-Stuy. In Queens, we're in Jackson Heights, Corona, Elmhurst, which is that triangle that they have over there. One of the most diverse neighborhoods in the US, if not the world there. And they're all, they have their own thing. One of the things that they share are crime and housing, unfortunately, right? Bad housing, that is, right? And many other things, but then every neighborhood has its own taste, its own feel, and its own history, and it should deserve to be portrayed in the way that it is, that it's supposed to. In the Bronx, we have a lot of the South Bronx areas. We're by the Yankee Stadium, right? University Heights, Claremont Concourse. Manhattan, we got the fundamentals. Lower East Side, that has gone through so many changes, especially now. We have Harlem and El Barrio, which is east and west, but if we know the history, we know why we're mentioning that, and Washington Heights. So one of the biggest pieces within this is culturally competency, and also being an ally and having these relationships in these communities. As you can see, I was born in Ecuador, but I was raised here. So I've always had a different perspective, a more global perspective in communities. And I'm so grateful to have been brought up in New York, because I've been able to meet so many cultures and so many different points of views that have really opened up my mind. Oh, I'm sorry. Here we go. Within the focuses of resilience in communities, within the assessment piece, of course, we're looking at all the all the fundamentals and standards to look into for sustainability and resilience. But within that, when I look at a community, it's like saying, how do you stop hunger? There's no such thing as one focus or one answer. You need multiple approaches in order to come up with a solution. And you need a big global network in order to do this also. Local allies, global network, right? So now within here, you can see that, one of the things we focus is on culture, right? I make sure to work with people from the community. A lot of my partners are women and minority-owned businesses from around here. And if not, I make sure that, like I said, there's that connection. So that way these students of the community can see themselves growing in that, because that's another issue in regards to self-esteem or places we need to get to. In regards to food systems, I mentioned I'm a chef already. It's actually what got me started into sustainability, because once I started learning where sourcing came from, right? Then it all started making sense. So my whole thing is providing access to communities. So one of the things that I do, within RLA is I develop curriculum with communities because a lot of them don't have anything, but they want something, right? So I go with them, and starting out of all the focuses, I start with food because these people are hungry and they're not well fed and they're sick because of their situations, because of being right next to food swamps and food deserts, right? So first I feed them, I show them about fresh food, they get it, and then I start, all puns intended, I give them more information within digestible bites so they could get this. So right now, for example, I have these junior high school students, they're going crazy over the food. The next thing is, okay, let's start community gardens. Let's start green roofs, right? That allows me to start conversations into smart buildings, among other things, which is the contractor in me, right? Then we go into built environment. I've been lucky to know a little bit of everything, but I've been more lucky to have great people in my network that are urban planners, engineers, architects. So I know a little bit of how to work together. I'm kind of like the human building information modeling through Revit, right? We're all working together and we're putting in all this information and we're getting it together. Talking about that, there's technology that I want to bring to the community that's much needed. And then in regards to business development, for example, I mentioned I used to be, and I will be again, a contractor for NYSERDA. I'm focusing on this right now. I'm human, right? But I was one of 2 Latinos at that time. I don't know how many now. So you're telling me out of millions of Latinos, right? Or people of color, you're telling me that NYSERDA only had a certain amount there. It was something to definitely be proud of, but it's something that we need more. I'm not saying it's NYSERDA's fault by any means, right? But, us in here in the community need to empower ourselves and take responsibility. We need to give them the pathways to learn so that way we can get them there. And this is one of the things that I'll be partnering up with SBDC in Brooklyn with. Here we go in regards to LEED for Community. So the pilot that we're gonna do this evaluation for, as you can see, what we want out of this are solutions, right? So through these benchmarking platforms, we want implementation of energy conservation measures, or ECMs, right? The acronyms within. We want definitely entrepreneurship and training to come out of this. Our approach, I'm sorry, I can't really see this, is implementing sourcing strategies, right? Not only for food, but for everything from building to you name it, right? As you can see, what we're going to be touching on, the assessment allows us to really get into it. And I feel that with culinary classes, you start really knowing about sourcing because now you're going into lifestyle and everything becomes a thing. We're looking at definitely retrofitting the built environment. We're looking at championing renewable energies, depending on how it fits per case. Because, when we're talking about these assessments, it's a macro level. Right now, we're talking about more micro level successes that we want as we start dealing with different building types. We're talking about the promotion of electric transportation, right? That definitely needs to be a big thing alongside with charging stations. We provide services for economic growth, which are these partnerships that we're talking about with SBDC, SBA, Brooklyn Chamber of Commerce, and ideally other partners that we want to bring into this. We definitely want to create local food systems. As we mentioned, we are offering workshops and free classes for them through RLA, but then the evolution from that becomes, as they start learning in digestible bites, they're going to want the green roofs, they're going to want the community gardens, they're going to want all these other things, and we haven't realized our economic power, right? And through this, it helps us align and realize that, again, we would like to streamline resources for public health, and we would like to update waste management systems or lack thereof. Brooklyn pilot. Now, first, we're going to go into assessment, as we mentioned, where we're going to find ways to address the inequities within this project. Here's a snapshot into Community Board 1. Community Board 1 also has Greenpoint, but for the purposes of this presentation and just overall for my focus in communities, we're only going to focus in Williamsburg and East Williamsburg. As you can see, we have a higher rep burden. There's a lot of people that come either undocumented, right, or are don't have their right paperwork. So not only do they have a limited English proficiency, right, there's a complete lack of knowledge of English, or there's other issues into entering not only the workforce but anything else. For example, which is personal to me, my mom's an architect. When we moved over here, it was so hard for her to learn this. And people don't care that you're an architect from anywhere else. Do you have the papers here? And now she's a babysitter. She makes good money. She's proud. But imagine how many other people, how many other immigrants had to come to this country and couldn't practice what they love because they didn't know the language. That's not fair. Let's look at the education levels, right? Me going through high school, me personally, I don't have a college degree. I found that my way to get into the green space. I went and paid NYU. I got my certificates. I love education, and I found my way. It is what it is. I don't like it. But me, out of 50 other people that I grew up with that went to high school, I don't want to mention the amount that unfortunately got locked up, that got murdered, the ones that dropped out, the ones that had kids. Only me and another person graduated high school. That's a horrible number, right? And I only graduated because I went to a vocational school because they wanted to press charges and other things. Let's not get into that, right? But it just shows that there could be change and growth with the people, and you could care. And the reason why I care is because I've been there and I went through it, right? So now, if we go to the other slide, this is more of a visual representation of the community. As you can see within the North Brooklyn area, right? As you can see within the Bronx, as you can see with certain areas there's high air pollution. That's where we're at, because we're also in zones that are industrial zones, right? Which has, definitely gains the momentum in regards to the bad air that's around there. If we look at the population density, right? We're looking at a lot of multifamily, a lot of high projects. We're looking at NYCHA, right? It's not comfortable. These buildings have been built for years on, right? They need retrofits. A lot of things need to happen here. Once again, here's the poverty level. As you can see, I mentioned what the Williamsburg looks like. And as you start getting to the west side of Williamsburg, you start seeing these numbers getting stronger. And then once again, here's a flood hazard. We're right next to the water. There's definitely issues. They also say that a lot of people leaving from Long Island because of future water rising are going to end up coming to Bushwick and Williamsburg and all these other places. So not only do we have to prepare for the community, but we have to also prepare for displaced communities due to climate migration. So now let's get started. In regards to natural systems and ecology. Oh, hold on. Let me just switch this up the other way because I can't see. Here we go. Okay. Yes.
You need to quicken up a little bit as well.
Yes, I'm going to quicken up right now. In regards to natural systems and ecology, we're looking at, of course, developing community charrettes, a plan alongside with the community. We have beautification projects that we have already done, and we're going to continue on doing, especially with the students driving us, basically building the car and them driving it. We're going to be doing next year these community appreciation events throughout the city, in parks, open streets, and parks, open streets. Okay, here we go. Sorry. In regards to transportation and land use, we're looking at working with schools and working with other partners in regards to not only electric buses, electric cars and charging stations alongside side. As you can see, here's a map of the extended bike map that you can see here. And there's wayfinding that we're going to add into this. So that way, everything could become ideally accessible within 15 minutes. We have enough train and bus lines to make everything very accessible to us. There's also a lot of access to electric scooters and cars also to help get us to the numbers that we want to. In regards to water efficiency, as I mentioned, as I'm doing with culinary, then we start talking about green roof. I've been lucky to work with USGBC Learners Builders Lab, and it goes into really not only water audits, but when you start looking at schools or certain places, there's a lot of lead or there's a lot of filtration that needs to happen even within the water. And like with anything, we're lucky to have good water in New York and not go through issues as of yet. Energy and greenhouse emissions. There's a lot of local laws and incentives and goals that the city has. the contractor and me, right? Luckily, I know all these local law compliances, so I know what the future is. So because this is the future, then we need to prepare for it. Unfortunately, our communities always come in last. So now what we're trying to do is we're trying to, through this project, the RLA Labs, and one of our partners at East Williamsburg Scholars Academy, not only are we starting programming to certify, to inform the students, but also to enter them to get into the workforce space. One of the ways that we're looking to finance and get there is through these ponds that are available through NYSERDA, where we already are talking with the Green Building Research Institute, among Pratt Institute and other partners, so that way we can develop also a team and assist our communities. In regards to material and resources, as you can see within the zoning, like I mentioned, with what we're doing with Pratt, we're looking at developing a class for upcycling. We're developing street cleaning initiatives, upcycling with industrial zones, recycling and culinary classes initiatives, where I'll be able to then talk about composting, recycling, among everything else, because a lot of these places don't even have a system in the first place. So everything little by little, and ideally with the students, making the parents, making everyone else get into this. When we're talking about quality of life, I mentioned these events, I mentioned these workshops that we're going to be providing, these services. They'll be all basically available through my website, through an app that we're going to have, and through partners. So that way we could always be able to assist the communities. A little bit into the partnership with East Williamsburg Scholars Academy. You know, we're going to start a space there, which I mentioned, RLA Labs, where we're basically going to streamline and handhold these students to give them as many opportunities as possible. The word I want from them is abundance, and that's something that they don't know about. As you can see, we're starting 25 Saturdays free with multiple partners, certifications. We're doing this no matter what, because this is not about money. This is about intention. And we have great people with great intentions to do this. We will figure out the way, because we're doing something that's positive. And as you can see, something that's very much needed. We will get there. In regards to appreciation in the community event that I mentioned, right? It requires this three-step approach to beautify, activate, and preserve the community. As you can see, different examples here. What we want together are solutions, wisdom, and expression together. I got ahead of that with the together part, sorry. So now, let me finish with something that Margaret Meadows said, is that never doubt a group of small and thoughtful, committed citizens that can change the world. Indeed, is the only thing that ever has. And I'll wrap up my presentation with that. Thank you.
That was very powerful, Ricardo. We'll move to Ted Radzinski now. Thank you.
Stop share. Okay, stop share.
All right. Thank you. Let me get my screen shared here. Okay, can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Great. So thank you. Great presentation so far. And the thing that I really want to zoom in today on is how we really use the LEED Cities and Communities standard to really drive our focus on decarbonization of the project that we worked on. And I was really impressed with how the standard was set up and really guided the process. And the project that I'm going to talk about today is the Universal Beijing Resort that we recently got LEED Communities Gold certification for. And what's really cool about this project is, you know, we heard from Neil how, you know, he was working on a project that required integration with the whole community. Same thing we just heard from Ricardo, like working in different communities and how important that is. The beauty of this is you're working with one developer that controls the entire project, which is really gives us a lot of opportunity to take a holistic view and control many of the things that we wanted to do here. And just a quick background about me, I'm Tad Radzinski. I'm the president and one of the founders of Sustainable Solutions Corporation. We started our company back in 2001 when the first LEED standards came out. So we've been focused heavily on green building for quite a while. And I really believe that the cities and community standard is definitely the way we can make some big changes in the world in terms of reducing our impact on climate and really driving these community connections. So here's some images of the project. As you can see here, we celebrated this last year, being the first LEED Gold Community certification for a theme park. And many of you are probably thinking, well, a theme park, what the heck is going on there? But in reality, you know, we definitely, it is very much like a community in a city. It has tons of infrastructure, transportation, housing, lots of people coming in and out of the project and whatnot. And the thing that I want to emphasize on this one image here is you can see that there's a tremendous amount of green space and trees and other things that we embedded in here. And I want to talk about how we thought holistically about decarbonization on this project. This is an example of our approach as a company to decarbonization. You can see here, we know that cities are going to continue to grow, communities are going to continue to grow. So we take a snapshot of where we are now. And this was a plan and design project. So the project was being built out, and it's a master plan type of setup where there's going to be different phases. So we know where we were emissions today in terms of our greenhouse gases and where these emissions might go. And then we take different steps to look at changing behavior, designing the community to focus on various aspects in terms of green space and minimizing heat island. Ricardo just did a great image there of what was going on in terms of the impact on the communities from a environmental justice perspective in terms of how people are going to really be affected by climate change in the future as the planet continues to warm. Thinking about things like that. Also thinking about how we can integrate renewables and other things into the project. So now I'm just going to kind of talk about holistically how we went through the cities and community standard. And you can see here, natural systems and ecology, two big ones here, prerequisites, ecosystem assessment, and also green spaces. Heavy focus on that. The site we were working on was definitely a site that had been developed previously and needed to be redeveloped. There was a lot of invasive species and things like that. So in the ecosystem assessment, we knew that we wanted to really integrate lots of green space, native species, thinking about plants and green spaces, as well as reducing, the heat island effect throughout the site. So this was a really important aspect here, because if we can do that, number one, we're going to definitely reduce our delta T across our buildings of the future as they're being built out in terms of air conditioning load and things like that, and also employee and guest comfort by trying to minimize that heat island effect and the different impacts. Also, by integrating green space, we also know that that green space is going to absorb carbon over time. And that is definitely a critical aspect here of doing this thing locally where we can. The thing that we're really excited, we're required to put in about 11.25 square meters of green space per person, and 90% of dwelling units have to have a public park within a half mile. With this project, we exceeded the green space by over 150% of the LEED requirement for the prereq. Again, it was strategic. We wanted to earn the points, of course, but we also wanted to make sure that we were really planning for the future here for decarbonization and optimizing quality of life for all, as well as the carbon footprint reduction. The other one that we took a hard look at is how do we get people in and out of this site? Obviously, there's going to be lots of employees coming here. There's going to be lots of guests. So we took a hard look at our transportation, and that is a huge component. If any of you have looked at decarbonization strategies for cities or communities, their transportation system is one of the biggest drivers of that after their buildings and operations. So we definitely integrated a very significant amount of walkability and bikeability to reduce the need for vehicles. In fact, by putting in access to quality transit and alternate fuel vehicles, we were able to really achieve some great success here. In this project, there's actually a subway stop that was designed into the project. So many people can now come to the site and come to the park without having to drive vehicles. So the parking footprint shrunk tremendously. We also made it so people could bike and walk easily to the site, interconnecting with the local city and whatnot. And then for vehicles that were going to be utilized on site, we did provide electric vehicle parking spots which greatly exceeded the LEED requirement there. Another area that we looked at was, and this is what was, I think is a really great aspect of cities and communities, it was basically requiring us to understand the greenhouse gas emissions that were going to be coming out of this. And we took a look at this using a life cycle lens. We also had to take a hard look at energy efficiency throughout the site and think about decarbonization as we were designing. So you can see here, we used a life cycle approach to quantify the GHG emissions. We definitely had good predictions on what the electricity and fuel consumption would be for the site. But then we got into even looking at what was going to be our waste generation and what were the future impacts of waste. What was going to be the issues around refrigerants and things like that. We were doing all these analyses and calculations, and our greenhouse gas emissions per capita was about half of what was allowed in this prerequisite. So again, careful planning and thinking about how we were going to move forward here was really important to take this holistic view of carbon reduction. The other thing I mentioned, waste. Waste is a big one, and I want to back up 1 second here. I do want to really emphasize the energy efficiency aspects that were driven in here as well. Infrastructure-wise, a lot of with this being its own community, has a significantly large wastewater system, water distribution systems, so pumps and street lighting, and every building integrating LEDs and energy efficient principles throughout. Super insulation on buildings where possible. When we looked at the materials and resources credits, we knew that any waste generated on this site were future greenhouse gas emissions that could come out of a landfill if this material went to landfill, especially organics. So we put a really heavy emphasis on designing for good material management and processing of materials to minimize the amount of materials that had to go to landfill or incineration. And we were able to integrate in aerobic digesters on site that created an organic material that we could use throughout the landscaping, as well as for other areas if needed in terms of trails and different things like that. And I do want to really emphasize to all of you, that food waste you throw in the trash or paper or anything that goes into a landfill now is future methane. And that's going to be a huge issue. Even if we got methane controlled out of landfills, we're still going to have challenges with that. So if we can manage it in a natural and ecological way, that's definitely the most important thing we should be doing here. Same thing with materials like recyclables, et cetera, recovering those materials and getting them back. I did want to really emphasize, just like Ricardo and also Neil, heavy emphasis on education here. We actually filed an innovation credit where we formed local school partnerships. Many of the employees here could go through training and education to help them in their jobs. And we also integrated in there education on sustainability and climate change, just so people could really understand the impacts and the importance of different things they were going to do. So with that, I'm going to wrap it up. I know we have a couple more speakers, so I will stop sharing here and let you turn it over to the next speaker, Vatsal.
Thanks a lot, Ted. I think that you did highlight very interesting aspects, like you are located in this particular region, but you are dealing with international projects. And that was one of our interests, to highlight this particular project. And again, it's a plan and design. It's a unique, theme park. And as you said, it's a community in itself. So many people go in and out of it, and we can promote many sustainability and other aspects via such projects. So thank you so much for agreeing to our invite and being.
And I did want to emphasize as well that, really important, being that we are working in China, a lot of different codes and standards that you have to understand. Many of us have worked in the US and we understand this. I've been doing the green building work for many years, and I've done it in some other countries, but this one was a really interesting one to really learn those codes and standards. And I will say that the GBCI and USGBC were so supportive on this project, really appreciated the help. And we did do pre-certification, which I highly recommend. So really, really great effort by the team here. And it was a team effort, not only everybody in the park and the designers and the owners, but a huge, great relationship with USGBC and GBCI. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Ted. It's our honor to be working with you. And now I will move to Eric Bacchus, who worked with his class, his students, to certify a community. Thank you, Eric.
Yeah, I really appreciated Tad, you speaking to the educational part of your aspect there with the Universal Park and where we're going with that. That was great work there. Thanks, and everybody, all the other speakers. I know our time is short given how things have gone, and I'll try to breeze through. I was blessed really with the opportunity to utilize not just my students. It's the university students. I don't own them; they're not my property. These are wonderful young adults who are really passionate about things and talk about the New York Olympic region. So we in New York State are blessed with hosting the Olympics twice. Beijing is the only other place that can say that they've done that twice in the same spot. Now they did the summer and winter games. Now Lake Placid was the original duplicate. They did it in 32 and 1980, and we probably remember quite a bit about it. But it's a unique place, and so this is just a project. We were very early. This is actually during the pilot phase of the LEED for Communities project. We were very early in adoption phase, working with our community partners. And as you saw, it was a focus for them for a lot of different reasons. Why did this place? This is in the heart of the Adirondack Park. If for those are not familiar, the Adirondack Park is one of the most regulated parks in the world. It is a model for many other national parks, including places in Africa and in Asia, for how they manage the land and manage what's going on. And it also has had these great events that kind of are iconic sports events and things like that. But there's a community that lives there. This is not just a place people visit, not just a place that people live in this park. This is a park that's lived in. And how does that work? And the people there really had a passion for what they wanted to do and around sustainability and resilience. What was going on? How are they going to make sure that they perpetuate the legacy of their community into the future in a meaningful way? And we had the privilege of really working together with some great partners that we've actually been working with for a while. So Clarkson University, where I work as a professor and a director of the construction engineering management program, has had a long relationship, literally to building the facilities in 1980 and performing there for sports activities for many years. And we've had a lot of work with them over the last several years. We started engaging with these kind of big hosting events in a formal way in 2019. We had actually started with them earlier than that to try to get that going and being a part of it. And we created a partnership between the university, the local communities of the village of Lake Placid, the town of North Elba. New York State has a kind of weird jurisdictional thing in its upstate region where they have these contiguous towns within the counties. The Olympic Regional Development Authority, again, a unique New Yorkism of having these authorities that are non-jurisdictional necessarily, that they work at a direct reporting relationship to the state, but it was responsible for all the Olympic venues and activities that had been developed and continue to maintain them. And then the local high school. So we work with the local school district, Lake Placid Central School District, the Blue Bombers, to actually do this. So we came together around a series of things. And really what the LEED for Communities project, and I love that Neil was talking about this earlier on, how it has brought people together in a conversation. And really what's going on here to do a lot of different things, a lot of different needs that don't necessarily fit into a category or thing, but of the system, but really spur the activity and the communication and the connections that make things happen. We've actually at the university been able to be blessed again, be part of this because we're actually doing research on this. We've been working on understanding how systems like LEED for Communities or LEED for Cities function and how they work with communities. Because part of the idea of resilience in these systems is, are the communities able to get recertified? The idea is that this is not just a do the certification and be done. This is a model and mode and how to go forward. And so we're interested in studying that, understanding that, and looking at LEED for Cities and LEED for Communities as a model, but broadly across different types of systems that might be out there, and trying to understand how communities, why they make these choices, why they decide to go forward, and how they go forward. So our specific effort was, we did get certified LEED Gold cert for communities in September 2019. We understand it's a 5-year certification. We have a commitment from all the partners now. This is as of this last month to recertify in 2024. So we're in 2022. We're 2 years ahead of time. We've got a commitment to do it. Now that we got to figure out the money and the fees and all that, but we'll do that. But this is driving now a new comprehensive plan for community. So we're taking now an existing community who already had certain goals and objectives, wanted to focus on sustainability and resilience, and enhancing it in a meaningful way using LEED for Communities. Our effort going into this was using, as Vatsal said, using students this is a great opportunity for our next generation, the people that are going to carry this water for us in the future, to get knee deep and involved in this. And so this is a busy slide, I know, but we worked with, we started off with a 15-week semester we call our Adirondack semester. It's a intentional in-place activity where the students actually live in a community where they're going to work. And so living learning community in that space, and they actually do a project. In this case, they were the ones doing the lift. They were going out and finding the data we needed for everything from greenhouse gas emissions to vehicles mile traveled to the crime rate. And they actually delved into this and they learned along the way. We put around the core project certain courses, they understood the place and so on. We gave them other tools to make sure they're enabled. And you know, the results are a transdisciplinary project. At the end of the day, they're the ones that are on here, and you can see the disciplines of the students. I've gotten rid of the names for reasons of purpose. Sadly, you know, there's some things with the legalisms here. I can't share the names of students. Glad to do that one-on-one with you. Some fabulous people. Now they're actually working. One actually is now at Guelph University in Canada doing her master's thesis in this area because of how she was spurred on by this amazing work. And so what was the results? So, you know, one of the things that we learned from this process, and this is kind of some things that both Neil and Tad mentioned and Ricardo mentioned too, is you start learning about the community. And so this slide is I think that this is me, the power slide. There's some numbers on here that would surprise the heck out of you. How is it that there are 578 violent crimes per 100,000 in Lake Placid? That sounds crazy. It's insane. That seems like a massively high crime rate. And anywhere else it would. But when you think about a tourist community where you have so many people, there's actually sometimes 5-fold more people in town from out of town than there are living in the town. That changes your thing. So your population metric becomes really skews your per capita here. Another one is interesting is 45.9, 45, basically 46 miles traveled per person per day. That is like a lightning bolt saying to you, there's a problem here. What this means is that again, this is a small village in the middle of the Adirondack Park. What's going on? It's not like they're driving from, you know, Westminster into the city. What's going on here? It's because people that work in town in the hospitality industry cannot afford to live in town. The housing is gone, and look at the Gini index kind of. So when you look at what you get out of the system, whether it be in this case, this was the pilot, so this was the metrics, the common metrics. It's now in our prerequisites in 4.1. But the point is, those really help start looking. Hey, where do you need to look at what your challenges are? How do you deal with inequities and challenges? And it opened the eyes of this community in a meaningful way to really reevaluate where they're going. What were the things that they wanted to have as metrics on that? So they volunteered to say, hey, we're not happy with just the things that are in the prerequisites. We want to start measuring other things. And they've done an intentional effort to do that. We've got a ton of different metrics. We're measuring, some of them are simple things like heating degree days and cooling degree days, but there's a ton of other ones, like how many mountain bike trails do we have? Or how many businesses are committing to reducing or eliminating single-use plastics? And New York State kind of helped us with that in terms of some legal things, but it already was getting ahead of the curve in a meaningful way to kind of engage this community. So where are they going to go? We do have upcoming here this winter in January, the World University Games. It's going to be an opportunity to bring the world into Lake Placid again, which is going to be awesome. We're going to be helping with that as a university, but beyond that, we have efforts working with our partners at SUNY ESF to look at clean water solutions. There's a water issue there in this community. You wouldn't think about that in a place that's got a lot of snow. Well, actually, there's less snow now because of how climate change has affected them. So that's impacting their water sources and supplies and the salinity of it in this particular case in Mirror Lake. There's also the idea of dealing with this housing equity issue, looking at community mobility. How can we get people moving in and out of town, but also within town? Because there's a huge traffic problem that's also came out of that vehicle mile travel. A lot of people just driving around when they could maybe walk or bike or take other alternate means. And so I was excited to see the things talked about by Neil, for instance, about engaging Tufts and the biometrics, because that's really important in thinking about where we're going. And we're doing some of that work indirectly as well. So the best part of this, though, is this photo right at the bottom. Is here are the students, both high school students and our college students, getting a certificate for LEED Gold certification. I mean, I can't tell you a bigger win-win for me is to see the students I had the opportunity to work with to do this work, to engage in this activity, being celebrated like this. This was huge and meaningful to them. It changed their lives. No question about it. And that is the kind of thing, not only for these students, it's changing the community's lives. And I think that's what's powerful about this. We can change lives. And I think Ricardo talked about how that you did with food. We can do it in many different ways using this tool of LEED for Communities. So I'm excited to answer your questions and engage with you in conversation about what we're doing this. So I'll stop sharing at this point and hand it back to Vatsal. Thank you very much.
Eric, again, thank you. Very impactful, powerful, and the way you worked with students and Steve to do it as a part of your semester. And, community gained a lot out of it as well. So we'll be very happy to talk about how to take that discussion further. But if all of you please switch on your cameras, we are happy to receive additional questions. But meanwhile, I think let me get started by just asking a very simple question to you all. I mean, you all have been working on 1,000 different things. And my interest, as I think all of you highlighted, that this framework can be powerful. Now, as Neil, Eric, Ted, Ricardo, you highlighted, you would want to take this discussion further. So how different ways in which we can engage your stakeholders in terms of clients at times for TED, stakeholders in terms of Ricardo's case, the community. Neil, for you, stakeholders are a little bit different. Eric, for you, your students as well as the community that you work with and many other communities that you'll be working with. And you're working on writing grants as well, Eric. So I mean, a lot of interesting things. Just highlight, how do you think this framework, obviously it is agile and it is improving over time, but basically, broadly, the framework, how can it be useful to you and your stakeholders? Thank you.
I guess
Oh, go ahead, Neil.
I was just going to say, knowing your audience is a big thing, and the system is so broad, it has something for everybody. So, if you've got people that have issues with, economic development, they're concerned this is going to stifle economic development. There's elements that you can steer them towards to say, no, this is actually a value added component to, to requiring a business to do this, to requiring, a municipality to invest in this infrastructure. Look at it as an investment. Look at the multiple co-benefits of all of these things, right? You're going to have, from implementing green infrastructure, for example, our DPWs are like, oh my God, that's going to cost us $1 million to maintain, and we don't have the manpower to do it. But if you show them the economics behind it and the demonstration projects that's showing them how it can be done, how it can be easily maintained, how it's not infrastructure out of sight, out of mind. I mean, there's something for everybody. So knowing your audience and playing towards what their concerns are, and trying to address them has been a key for us, using the system to identify those, those elements that they, will help them change their mindset.
Sure.
Yeah, I would say two things that I would want to see. Obviously there's many cities around the world that have made commitments for climate reduction and carbon footprint reduction and whatnot. I think every one of them should be looking at this and using the tools in here to, do that greenhouse gas analysis. And I loved what Eric just showed, all the analytics that they did around the site at Lake Placid. I mean, shocking some of those things were, and we're seeing this all over the place of these inequities. And we heard Ricardo talk about that as well, where there's no affordable housing and people have to travel far distances because they can't afford to live where they work. So I do think this is a great guide for anybody that's doing anything in a city or community, whether it's a redevelopment or whatever, because it really melds everything about quality of life, basically, climate change and waste management and all these different things. Even the embodied carbon, I didn't get to talk about that. We looked at all the materials we were using to try to select the lowest embodied carbon materials that we could use in infrastructure as well. And there's so many great things here. And the only other thing I would suggest here, and I know we've talked about this, is I would love to see future LEED standards. If you are doing a building in one of these communities, just like ND gives you credit, if it's a LEED cities and communities, you should get the equal credits for many of the things, because I think it drives some really great things forward, and everybody in the whole value chain should be using it.
Yeah. Eric, if I can just take a minute to respond to what Ted said. Ted, to your last point, earlier today, I was on a call with our LEED technical team, and we definitely discussed about this aspect about LTC1 and getting credits the way LEED ND would give you credits similarly. Go ahead, Eric. Thank you.
Yeah, so you're asking, how do you engage your stakeholders? So there's a couple of things. One, I'm actually, as you mentioned, I'm involved in two other ones. One's the City of Schenectady, and now the town of, I guess it's really the county of Tompkins County, but really Ithaca, New York, right? That's doing the engagement with LEED for communities there. And so I think one of the things that you need to do is we need to kind of get it into the eyes and the ears of community leadership. And that's one of the things that I was privileged to do out of this work, working with Vatsal at New York State DEC, Department of Environmental Conservation, for those not familiar with New York State, was to actually be part of her webinar on their, what they call Climate Smart Communities Initiative, and say, hey, one of the ways you can do that is by doing LEED for communities. And I know Ithaca actually heard that message as part of why they applied, and part of our conversations was part of why they did that. And so others are looking at this because now they say, hey, there's ways to do this, and it's looked favorably upon things like, as you mentioned, writing grants. When we write grants, you say, hey, you are a LEED community and you've gotten certified. That means something. And grantees want to go to places where they're making these kind of commitments. They have the systems thinking that Neil's talking about, because you can't get more jobs without thinking about the whole totality of the system. It's just not going to work. It's not, yeah, you may get a few things, but moving Dollar General into your town is not going to solve your problems. You're going to have to think about what are the other things that make that all work. And what the really the getting the point with things like New York State with this new law, CLCPA, if you're not familiar with this, where there's going to be a requirement to really double down on some serious climate activities. And to do that, it's a question of why aren't you doing this? Because this will help you get those goals achieved and meet those mandates in a meaningful way. And Massachusetts has some similar things. I know Maine and Vermont and New Hampshire are all looking at similar types of things to really try to up their game. So I think across the region, this is something to be thought about, that why aren't you doing it? And it's really a way to get there, because it's not about the $1 million project you can't maintain. It's, hey, the $3 million worth of stuff you got in the ground that you can't maintain, how do we make it better?
Makes sense. Ricardo, you are trying to use the LEED for cities and communities existing rating system to right now evaluate what is on the ground. And then you're thinking about utilizing LEED for cities and communities plan and design to think about the future. What are your thoughts, Ricardo, here? I think we'll come back to Ricardo soon enough. We have 3-4 more minutes. Meanwhile, I think Ricardo or somebody else talked about, Neil, probably you talked about bite-table size, small size discussion in which we can get the discussion started with our stakeholders. So for all of you, how do we get that discussion started with our stakeholders in bite-table chunks, small chunks, just to begin with, so that others on the call may think about it that way as well? How to get the discussion started on LEED for communities in bite-table chunks? Thank you.
Let me just start with, I think the first thing you do is you say, hey, you're about to do some planning. You're having some sort of plan, whether it's a new project or it's an existing community, you're doing some sort of planning. What is the way you're going to frame how you're going to do that, right? If you can start with a question of how do you do your planning, and then say, hey, this is a tool. This is one of the things you can use. And it's a very comprehensive one. It's a very, it's not just about energy. It's not just about materials. It's about the spectrum of what it means to be sustainable, be resilient. This could be a guidebook for you. And I think that's a starting point. Neil, I'll stop there.
Yeah, I would totally agree. We approached it as, we didn't go to the community and say, hey, we're going to do LEED for cities and communities. We said, what are the issues? What are your challenges? And we kind of looked at them one by one and, said, well, hey, there's this tool that can help us comprehensively address multiple items. So we could do one thing and have the co-benefits of that one thing can achieve several objectives. So, starting off with understanding what the issues are and not just, as Eric said, it's a very broad system. And, it's overwhelming at first. So you don't want to go in and say, hey, we're doing LEED for cities, and getting the buy-in from your leadership in a community is huge. We went out to, the community groups, went out to the mayor, technically the mayor of Devon's. We're not a town, but if we were the mayor, and talked to the whole team of our engineers, public works, everybody, and individually sat down with them and then as a group and to get their buy-in. So.
Yeah, I would just throw in really quick that I found this super valuable in educating the people that were on the design team as well as local community members, because, you know, you could pick some of the different categories and credits and be able to say, this is why we want to do this, and here's the value. And then we would look at, like, you know, the life cycle value, life cycle cost, you know, those kind of things that really helped people understand. And it served as a really great guide to drive the whole design and construction process. So it was really great.
Thank you so much, Ted.
And just-
Ted, you are a consultant. Go ahead, Neil.
Oh, I was just going to say one more thing. You know, the thing that I mentioned, I think I said this earlier, the value added component. You know, we've really been able to use this, like businesses and residents that are looking to locate or move to Devens, when they find out that we're a LEED for cities and communities, they're like, oh my God, this is right in line with our corporate sustainability objectives, right? So it's, you know, our leadership in the community saw that, and they're like, okay, we got to be doing this. Like Eric was saying, why aren't you doing this? You know, like
We had the same thing with the World Games. We got sponsors for the World University Games because of this commitment. If we hadn't had a very clear ESG commitment and certification saying we're doing stuff, that would not have happened. So it's huge, huge.
Thank you. I think without further ado, it's already 12 p.m. Eastern. So I just wanted to once again thank Gautam and Madhya for bringing us here. But I wanted to hit this final punchline that Ted, you are a consultant and a LEED champion for all these years. Neil, you manage a community. So you're from a kind of community representative kind of person. And Eric, you are a professor and also writing grants and all. And Ricardo is a social entrepreneur. So when Gautam, Madhya, and I started this discussion, I thought to bring you all together. Obviously, it happened a little bit organically and dynamically as well, but thought to bring these diverse perspectives on this particular discussion so that we can just throw out various perspectives in which LEED for communities can be used effectively. And I respect all of your thoughts, suggestions, inputs. I respect working with you and looking forward to many other similar discussions going forward. But thank you all sincerely.
Thanks for inviting us, Vatsal.
Thank you. Enjoyed the discussion.
Yeah, loved it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. And be in touch. I'm going to send an email out to the attendees. And I'm so glad we recorded this for anybody that missed it as well. Thank you again.
Take care.
Thanks.
Have a great day.
Bye-bye.